The FBI are responsible for some of the biggest arrests in US history. From catching the Unabomber to catching various serial criminals, the FBI has done it all. That's not to say that the FBI are infallible though. Here are 5 unsolved FBI mysteries. Number 5. The FBI have a 222-page report dedicated to the murder of Elizabeth Short, also known as the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth's case is one of the longest-standing mysteries in FBI history, and still puzzles sleuths today. On January 15, 1947, a woman walking her child home came across the body of Elizabeth Short, whose body was found on the side of the road. The crime scene was neat without any signs of blood or a struggle, leaving passers-by to think that Elizabeth was simply a discarded mannequin. Due to the lack of blood or evidence, police quickly came to the conclusion that Elizabeth had lost her life elsewhere and then was dumped here. Elizabeth laid as a Jane Doe until the FBI were able to match her fingerprints to police records. It turns out that Elizabeth had been arrested in Santa Barbara, California, just months prior for underage drinking. She had moved to LA to pursue a career in acting, and while it was a struggle, she did her best to get by. It's been theorized that perhaps she was working as a street worker to help support herself until she got a big break in the film industry, but it was never confirmed. Whoever had taken Elizabeth's life had extensive surgical and anatomical knowledge due to the state of her body. The criminal had even altered letters to the Examiner newspaper, and these letters were created using clippings from other newspapers so experts would not be able to analyze his handwriting. Along with the letters, he sent items such as her birth certificate, business cards, personal photos, and her address book. He would continue to write into various newspapers, with one such letter reading, "I will give up Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." A fingerprint was lifted from one of these letters, and that gave the FBI a glimmer of hope. That was until they realized that the fingerprint was not in any of their databases. The letters and calls would slowly fizzle out, leaving the FBI without answers. Many have come forward, claiming that they know Elizabeth's killer, and some have even claimed that the Zodiac was responsible and that this case was a precursor to his later spree. Until further evidence surfaces, Elizabeth's file will remain in the cold case pile within FBI archives. Number 4. Following the 9/11 attacks in the USA, citizens and law enforcement agencies were waiting, wondering if there could be another inbound attack. Their sense of security and safety had been shattered following 9/11. And now the whole world was on its edge. In October of 2001, letters from the USA began popping up filled with anthrax. Every citizen's worst nightmare had come true. There was yet another attack on innocent civilians. It all started with Bob Stevens, a journalist who was rushed to the hospital with suspected meningitis. It wasn't until his condition was further investigated that scientists found traces of anthrax in his system. Stephen wasn't the only person to be infected, and up until the end of 2001, 4 others would lose their lives and 17 would become infected via anthrax inhalation. Leonard Cole, a bioterrorism expert, commented, "The first day or two following the announcements were words of denial that this would have been related to any catastrophic event, but it was somehow a freak outbreak of some sort." But as more information came out, it became clear that there had been some conscious, deliberate release of anthrax. Letters to prominent figures, such as politicians and newsreaders, were intercepted before they reached their intended target. All of these letters had been laced with anthrax in hopes that it would reach the intended victim. Even after a lengthy investigation, the FBI are still no closer to finding the culprits behind the anthrax letters of 2001. Many were questioned and named as suspects, but there have been no convictions due to a lack of evidence, and the person responsible is still free to roam the streets. Number 3. It's been 16 years since Okie Albert Kite Jr. was found in the basement of his Aurora, Colorado home, beaten and having lost his life. It was clear from the crime scene that Okie had suffered for hours before his death. Police had initially shown up to the property after Okie failed to make contact with his family. As his family were living out of state, they called the police department and asked them to perform a wellness check. A local detective was first to the scene and discovered Oki in the basement. Upon further investigation of the house, the police department found that Oki had remained in the house. The perpetrator had cleaned the crime scene, eaten food from the fridge, slept in Oki's bed, and had even taken a shower, all while cleaning up after themselves and being extremely careful to not leave behind any evidence. The only thing missing was $1,000 from Oki's bank account. The perpetrator had taken his truck, drove to an ATM, and used his card to withdraw the cash. The odd thing is that Oki had a lot more money in his account, but the man only withdrew a small sum. In the lead up to his death, Oki had posted several advertisements in the University of Colorado's library, stating he was looking for a roommate. A man by the name of Robert Cooper answered the advert, and within a few days, Cooper had finalized the agreement and was set to move in. Sadly, police would soon find out that the name Robert Cooper was fake, along with all of the other information he had provided on the rental agreement. Police had the following physical description of a middle-aged man with dark hair who walked with a limp and a cane and spoke with an Eastern European accent, but that was it. Oki wasn't the only person to encounter Robert Cooper. It appeared that Cooper had been inquiring with others looking for a roommate, but they declined after he gave the homeowner creepy vibes. Police theorized that this is how Cooper hunted his victims. He would trawl through advertisements until he found the perfect one. The FBI is appealing to anyone with information about Oki Kite Jr. They believe that the criminal may be moving around the country, doing the same to others. If you have any information, you're asked to contact your local FBI office or the American Embassy or consulate in your country. Number 2. Jennifer Wyatt's case is listed on the FBI website under Missing Persons VICAP, which stands for Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Jennifer, who was 21 years old at the time, has been missing from Nashville, Tennessee since June 28, 1980, and the FBI are appealing to anyone with information to come forward. When Jennifer didn't show up for work on June 30, 1980, her loved ones knew something was wrong. She hadn't shown up to church, and none of her family members were able to contact her. Her parents called the local police department, who conducted a search at her 293 Tanglewood Court, Nashville, Tennessee apartment. Everything inside was in order, and there were no signs of a struggle, and her car was still parked outside. Her last known movements were on June 28, 1980, when she'd returned home from a party. The case soon went cold. That was until December 11th of 1980, when Jennifer's driver's license was found on Blue Lake Road in Rutherford County, Tennessee, which is 15.5 miles away from her apartment. No one knows how it ended up there, but the FBI heavily suspect that foul play is involved. Number 1. Also listed in the VICAP section of the FBI's website is a woman only known as the Mount Vernon Jane Doe. However, unlike Jennifer, she's listed in the Unidentified Persons section. On Valentine's Day, 1988, the body of a young woman was discovered on the sidewalk of Carlton Avenue, Mount Vernon, New York. She'd been left in clear view of any passerby in broad daylight, and it appeared that the person who took her life had posed her upright using garage door springs. The case haunted the first attending officers. The woman, who's come to be known as the Mount Vernon Jane Doe, had ligature marks around her wrists, neck, and ankles, as well as extensive bruising to her face and body. Her cause of death was listed as strangulation, but it was clear to investigators that she'd been beaten too. Despite an exhaustive investigation, the FBI and Mount Vernon Police Department are still no closer to finding out the woman's identity, or that of her killer. Investigators visited different bars and street working places asking if anyone knew the woman, but to no avail, and they were back at square one. Possible leads and identities have come up in the past, and it was theorized that Mount Vernon Jane Doe could have been the victim of a serial criminal who claimed 3 women's lives in New York in the late 80s and into the 90s. However, DNA has conclusively ruled him out of this case. A private investigator believes that Mount Vernon Jane Doe could be missing Kathleen Marie Martin. Her family have agreed that Jane Doe and Kathleen look similar, but the height is wrong. Her sister commented, quote, "I thought it was my sister. The only problem is the height. Jane Doe is 5'3", and my sister is 4 inches taller." The Mount Vernon Jane Doe is described as either a white female or native of South America between the ages of 18 and 35, with light brown or bleached hair and hazel eyes. She's 5'3" and weighs 105 pounds. She has freckles and moles on her face, pierced ears, and her nails were painted a reddish pink. Dentals, fingerprints, and DNA are all available for the Mount Vernon Jane Doe, and anyone with information is urged to contact either the Westchester County Medical Examiner's Office or the FBI. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.